Her lips were soft, her smile radiant, yet something didn't sit right. Olivia had always been the perfect partner, poised, intelligent, and supportive of my every endeavor. Tonight, however, her gaze lingered a fraction too long, as if searching for reassurance. Or perhaps hiding something. The evening air was cool as I watched her sleek black car disappear down our long driveway. I should have returned to my desk, immersed in the financial projections for tomorrow's board meeting, but instead I stood at the window, staring into the dark void of the night, my chest tightening with an unfamiliar sensation. Doubt. Olivia had claimed she was meeting an old friend in town. I had no reason to disbelieve her, and yet a memory surfaced, unbidden. Last week at the anniversary gala for my tech empire, Apex Innovations, I had introduced her to a few of my colleagues. There was a fleeting exchange between her and Simon Grayson, my CFO, that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't flirtatious, at least not overtly. But there had been an ease between them, a familiarity I hadn't expected. I'd brushed it off then. Simon was an integral part of my team, and Olivia had always been warm with my associates. But now that moment felt heavier, like a puzzle piece out of place. Shaking off the thought, I tried to refocus. I was Lucas Drake, a man who thrived on precision and logic. My entire career was built on dismantling chaos and turning it into opportunity. Yet here I was, pacing my pristine home office, wrestling with an instinct I couldn't rationalize. Unable to concentrate, I opened the tracking app on my phone. Olivia had insisted we install it years ago, after a close friend's car was stolen. Just for emergencies, she'd said with a laugh. Tonight it felt like an invasion of privacy, but curiosity won out over guilt. Her car was stationary, parked in a neighborhood across town that didn't match the cafe she'd mentioned earlier. My pulse quickened. It was late, nearly 9 p.m., and this wasn't the kind of area Olivia frequented. Elegant yet modest, it was the polar opposite of the high society venues we usually attended. I tried calling her, once, twice, no answer. My gut churned with unease. I debated letting it go. Trust had always been the cornerstone of our marriage. But the lingering image of Simon's knowing smirk flashed in my mind. Something felt off, and I needed to know why. Grabbing my keys, I headed to the garage. The drive was short but agonizing. Each red light felt like an eternity, my mind replaying every interaction, every nuance, every subtle change in Olivia over the past few months. Had I been too consumed by work to notice the cracks in our foundation? When I arrived, her car was unmistakable, parked neatly in the driveway of a modest two-story house. The lights inside glowed warmly, casting long shadows on the curtains. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white as I battled the urge to storm in unannounced. Instead, I approached cautiously, my heart pounding with each step. I rang the doorbell. A moment passed, then another. Finally, the door opened to reveal Simon Grayson, his usually composed face frozen in shock. Behind him, Olivia appeared, her expression a kaleidoscope of emotions: guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't quite define. The sight of them together in that house, this unspoken betrayal, was like a physical blow. "Lucas," Simon stammered, "I didn't expect—" "You didn't expect me to find you here," I interrupted, my voice low but sharp, my gaze locked onto Olivia, who opened her mouth as if to explain, then closed it, tears brimming in her eyes. The silence was deafening. In that moment, everything I had built, my career, my marriage, my carefully constructed world, felt precariously close to collapse. This was only the beginning, and I knew the storm that followed would leave no one untouched. The silence in the doorway stretched endlessly, thick with tension and unspoken truths. Simon shifted uncomfortably, his usual air of confidence replaced by the unease of a man caught in a snare. Olivia looked between us, her hands clasped tightly in front of her like a child awaiting punishment. I didn't move. My presence in that space was enough to disrupt whatever fragile lie they had constructed. Yet in my mind 1,000 scenarios played out, none of them granting me the clarity I craved. Was this a chance encounter? A benign misunderstanding? Or was it the first thread of a web that had been meticulously spun behind my back? "Lucas," Olivia finally spoke, her voice trembling. "This isn't what it looks like." I arched an eyebrow, my lips curling into a humorless smile. "Then enlighten me. What does it look like, Olivia?" Simon cleared his throat, attempting to insert himself into the conversation. "Lucas, I think we should all just—" "You don't get to speak." My voice was cold, sharp and final. Simon recoiled as if struck, his mouth snapping shut. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't discern if they stemmed from guilt, fear, or regret. "Please," she whispered, "let's not do this here. Let me explain. Privately." For a moment I considered acquiescing. There were neighbors to think about, reputations to protect. But then, I remembered who I was. Lucas Drake. A man who built an empire on truth, precision, and the brutal dismantling of lies. No. This wouldn't be swept under the rug with whispered reassurances and empty promises. I stepped past Simon into the house, my presence as deliberate as it was intimidating. The interior was modest but meticulously kept, a far cry from the opulence Olivia and I were accustomed to. A faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of my own simmering rage. "Start talking," I said, turning to face them. "Both of you." Simon opened his mouth, but Olivia cut him off, her voice rising in desperation. "This wasn't planned, Lucas. I didn't want you to find out this way." "That much is obvious," I said, crossing my arms. "What I want to know is how long this has been going on. Weeks? Months? Years?" Olivia flinched as if I'd struck her. "It's not like that," she said. "This isn't an affair." I laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. "An affair? Is that what you think I'm accusing you of?" "No, Olivia. This feels bigger than that. More calculated." It's hard?" Her eyes darted to Simon, who looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else. "It's complicated," she said weakly. "Complicated?" I repeated. "Then allow me to simplify it. Why are you here, Olivia? And why is he?" I jabbed a finger in Simon's direction. He glanced up at me and smiled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Simon sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "You deserve the truth, Lucas." My pulse quickened. The truth. It was a phrase I'd built my entire life around, and yet in this moment it felt more like a weapon than a virtue. Part of me wondered. "This house," Simon began, gesturing around him, "belongs to Michael Sorensen." I froze. Michael Sorensen, a name that had become synonymous with betrayal in my world. Once a trusted business partner, Sorensen had embezzled millions from Apex Innovations before vanishing without a trace. The fallout had been catastrophic, tarnishing my company's reputation and forcing me to rebuild from the ground up. "What does Sorensen have to do with this?" I demanded. Olivia stepped forward, her voice trembling. "He's been in contact with me." "In particular," came from both the prosperous and the poor. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. "In contact," I repeated. "For how long?" "Since the gala," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The gala, the event where I'd introduced her to Simon. The event where I'd noticed the first cracks in her otherwise flawless facade. The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. It was a question born of both disbelief and a desperate need to understand. "Because he offered me something I couldn't refuse," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He claimed he had information that could clear your name." I blinked, my mind struggling to process her words. "Clear my name? From what?" Simon shifted uncomfortably. "Lucas, you know the rumors haven't entirely died down. There are still people who believe you were complicit in Sorensen's scheme." I turned on him, my fury blazing anew. "And you thought this was the best way to handle it? By going behind my back?" "I didn't know about this until recently," Simon said defensively. "Olivia came to me after Sorensen contacted her. She didn't want to tell you until she was sure it was real." "And what is it?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "What exactly did Sorensen offer you?" Olivia hesitated, her hands trembling. "He claims he has evidence, documents, recordings, that prove he acted alone, but he wants something in return." "Of course he does," I said bitterly. "What does he want?" Her voice broke as she answered. "He wants money, Lucas. Enough to disappear for good." I laughed, the sound raw and humorless. "So, let me get this straight. You entertained a blackmailer, one who destroyed my company and nearly ruined my life, because you thought he could fix a reputation I rebuilt without his help?" I gave him what I hoped was a confident smile. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I did it for you." The words were a dagger to my heart. For me? Or for herself? The distinction felt crucial, yet elusive. Simon cleared his throat. "Lucas, I told her it was a bad idea, but she insisted." "Stop," I said sharply, cutting him off. "You're as complicit as she is." The weight of their betrayal settled over me like a suffocating fog. Olivia, the woman I'd trusted implicitly, had colluded with a man who'd nearly destroyed me, and Simon, my right-hand man, had enabled her deceit. But this wasn't just about trust. This was about power. Sorensen had thrown a grenade into my life, and now, years later, he was trying to detonate the remains. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. Emotion was a liability. Logic was my weapon. "This ends now," I said firmly. "I don't care what Sorensen promised you. We're not paying him a dime." "But Lucas," Olivia began. "Yeah, no," I interrupted. "He doesn't control us. Not anymore." Her shoulders sagged, the weight of her choices crushing her. Simon looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "I'll deal with Sorensen. But don't think for a second that this is over." As I stepped into the cool night air, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. Sorensen's reappearance wasn't a coincidence. This was a calculated move, a power play designed to exploit the cracks in my foundation. But he had underestimated me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming control, and I intended to do so with ruthless precision. The drive back to the house was a haze of fractured thoughts and mounting fury. The revelation of Olivia's and Simon's betrayal was a poison coursing through my veins, tainting every memory, every decision I had made. But this wasn't the time to drown in emotions. My anger, though volcanic, was focused. Sorensen had resurfaced, and this was no coincidence. He had chosen his pawns well, exploiting Olivia's naivety and Simon's loyalty, or perhaps greed. As I pulled into the driveway, the mansion loomed before me like a silent judge. Its grand facade, once a source of pride, now felt hollow. I killed the engine and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel as I forced myself to breathe. Emotions clouded judgment, and I couldn't afford that luxury. Sorensen was a manipulator, a man who thrived on exploiting weaknesses. He had used my wife and closest confidant against me, but now I would turn the tables. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. I walked through the marble foyer, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The housekeeper had gone for the day, and Olivia wasn't home yet. Good. I needed the space to plan my next move. My office was a sanctuary of order amidst the chaos. The walls were lined with bookshelves, the desk meticulously organized, and the air faintly scented with the leather of my chair. I powered on my computer, pulling up the surveillance system I had discreetly installed years ago. Every conversation, every deal, every betrayal. My empire was built on knowing more than anyone else. Tonight, I would use that to my advantage. I reviewed the footage from the past month, focusing on Olivia's movements. There were no glaring red flags at first, just the usual comings and goings. But then, 3 weeks ago, I spotted her meeting with Simon at a coffee shop downtown. It was subtle, 2 colleagues catching up, perhaps, but the way Olivia glanced around before sitting down told a different story. I zoomed in on their body language, noting Simon's leaning posture and Olivia's nervous fidgeting. This wasn't a casual meeting, it was the beginning of something calculated. The footage deepened my suspicions, but it wasn't enough. I needed proof. Something concrete to expose Sorensen's involvement and unravel his scheme. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years, one connected to a man whose skills operated outside the bounds of legality. "Lucas," a gruff voice answered. "Been a while." "Too long, Marcus," I said, leaning back in my chair. I need your help. Marcus had been my fixer during Apex's early days, a man who specialized in digging up secrets and eliminating threats. I hadn't used his services in years, but tonight I needed his expertise. I'm listening, Marcus said. I explained everything: Olivia's involvement, Simon's betrayal, and Sorensen's sudden reappearance. Marcus listened in silence, his only response a low hum of acknowledgement. I'll need 2 days, he said when I finished. Send me Sorensen's details, and any connections you suspect. I'll dig up everything. Money's no object, I said, but this has to be airtight. I can't afford any loose ends. You know me, Marcus replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. I'll be in touch. I ended the call, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Marcus would find Sorensen, and when he did, I would have the leverage to crush him. But the thought of Olivia lingered, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. Her betrayal wasn't just a professional misstep, it was personal, cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. As the hours ticked by, I immersed myself in work, combing through Apex's records for any sign of Sorensen's influence. If he had resurfaced, he would have left traces. Financial anomalies, coded messages, something. My analytical mind, honed by years of dissecting problems, thrived on the challenge. It was nearly midnight when the sound of Olivia's car pulling into the driveway broke my concentration. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, waiting as the front door creaked open and her hesitant footsteps echoed through the foyer. She appeared in the doorway to my office, her face pale and drawn. "Lucas," she said softly, "can we talk?" I gestured to the chair opposite me, my expression unreadable. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment we sat in silence, the weight of her choices hanging between us like a storm cloud. "I don't even know where to start," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I didn't want it to happen this way, but it did," I said, my tone cold. "And now you're going to tell me everything. No half-truths, no omissions. The full story, Olivia." She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "It started at the gala. Simon introduced me to Sorensen. I didn't know who he was at first. He didn't tell me his name. But then he started talking about you, about Apex. He said he had evidence that could clear your name, but only if I helped him." "And you believed him?" I asked, my voice laced with incredulity. "I didn't know what else to do," she admitted. "The way he spoke, he made it sound like he had power over you, over us. I thought if I could just get the evidence." "You thought you could fix it without involving me," I finished for her. "But instead, you played right into his hands." She flinched, her shoulders sagging. "I see that now. But I was scared, Lucas. Scared of what might happen if the truth about Sorensen came out." "What truth?" I demanded, leaning forward. "What does Sorensen have on me?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. "He claimed you knew about the embezzlement, that you covered for him to protect Apex." The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. "That's a lie," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I had no idea what he was doing until it was too late." "I know," Olivia said quickly. "I know that now, but at the time, I didn't know what to believe." Her words stung, but they also ignited a spark of clarity. Sorensen wasn't just trying to extort money. He was trying to destroy me. If he could tarnish my reputation, he could weaken my hold on Apex and possibly force me out entirely. I stood, pacing the room as the pieces of the puzzle began to align. Sorensen's scheme was more intricate than I'd anticipated, but it wasn't unbreakable. I had the resources, the connections, and the resolve to dismantle it piece by piece. "Olivia," I said, turning to face her, "if you want any chance of earning my trust back, you'll help me take him down." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "What do you need me to do?" "Everything you know about Sorensen, his demands, his plans, his weaknesses. Write it down. Every detail matters." She nodded, her hands trembling as she reached for a pen and notepad. As she began to write, I felt the first flicker of control returning. Sorensen had played his hand, but the game wasn't over. The reckoning had begun, and I intended to win. The days following Olivia's reluctant confession were a blur of relentless planning and strategic precision. Every moment was spent piecing together the fragmented web Sorensen had spun, unraveling his lies, and setting my own traps. Marcus, true to his reputation, delivered faster than I anticipated. His first call came less than 24 hours after our initial conversation. "You were right," Marcus said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "Sorensen's been playing a long game, but he's sloppy. I traced him to a safe house in Albany under the name Martin Steele. He's been moving cash through offshore accounts tied to shell companies. But here's the kicker. He's got a few accomplices closer to home." "Closer to home?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. Marcus paused, then said, "Your CFO, Simon Grayson. He's been helping Sorensen siphon funds back into a new venture, a startup with ties to a competitor." A wave of cold fury swept over me. Simon's betrayal had felt personal before, but this revelation elevated it to an entirely new level. He wasn't just betraying my trust, he was actively conspiring to undermine everything I'd built. "And Olivia?" I asked, the question barely a whisper. Marcus hesitated. "From what I can tell, she's a pawn. Sorensen used her to manipulate you, but I don't see evidence she's directly involved in the financial aspect. Still, her proximity to Simon raises questions." It was a small relief, but it didn't erase the damage. "Good work, Marcus," I said. "Keep digging. I want every detail." After ending the call, I sat in my office, staring at the neatly organized chaos on my desk. Notes, files, and diagrams covered every inch of the polished wood, each one a thread in the tapestry of Sorensen's betrayal. Simon's name was circled in red, a glaring reminder of the man who had once been my closest ally. Olivia entered the room cautiously, her eyes darting to the papers as if they might reveal some terrible truth. "Did you find anything?" she asked, her voice soft. "Plenty," I said, my tone devoid of emotion. "Enough to know this isn't just about Sorensen anymore." She flinched at the implication but didn't argue. Instead, she stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Lucas, I want to help." I looked up at her, searching her face for any trace of deception. There was none. Only guilt and a desperate need for redemption. "If you're serious about that, you'll need to follow my lead. No more secrets. No more independent decisions. Understood?" She nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," I said, returning my attention to the files. "Because this isn't just about taking down Sorensen. It's about reclaiming control over my company, my life, and my reputation." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus continued feeding me information, each new revelation adding another layer to the intricate plot Sorensen had constructed. Simon had been funneling money into a shadow company poised to launch a direct competitor to Apex. The audacity of it infuriated me, but it also fueled my determination. Olivia, true to her word, provided invaluable insights into her interactions with Sorensen. She recalled every conversation, every promise he made, and every veiled threat he issued. Her notes became the foundation of my strategy, a roadmap to dismantling Sorensen's operation from within. The first step was neutralizing Simon. Confrontation wasn't an option. He was too entrenched, too skilled at manipulation. Instead, I opted for a subtler approach. I instructed Marcus to leak false information through a carefully placed intermediary. Details of a lucrative deal Apex was supposedly pursuing. The bait was irresistible, and Simon, predictably, took it. Within 48 hours, Marcus had the evidence we needed: emails, text messages, and recorded conversations implicating Simon in corporate espionage. Armed with this, I called an emergency board meeting. The boardroom was a study in tension as I entered, a folder of damning evidence in hand. Simon sat at the far end of the table, his usual smug demeanor replaced by unease. The other board members exchanged nervous glances, sensing the storm brewing. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady but commanding, "I've called this meeting to address a matter of grave importance. It concerns the integrity of Apex Innovations and the actions of one of our own." I locked eyes with Simon as I spoke, watching the color drain from his face. He opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a raised hand. "You'll have your chance to speak," I said coldly. "But first, Let's review the facts. One by one I laid out the evidence, each piece a nail in Simon's coffin. By the time I finished, the boardroom was silent, save for the sound of Simon's labored breathing. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" I asked, my tone laced with icy contempt. Simon looked around the table, searching for allies, but found none. Finally, he slumped in his chair, defeated. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he muttered. "Sorensen promised it would be quick, that no one would get hurt." "No one would get hurt?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You were willing to destroy this company, betray the people who trusted you, all for a man who has already proven he can't be trusted?" Simon didn't respond, and I didn't press him further. The board voted unanimously to terminate him on the spot, and security escorted him from the building. It was a small victory, but it was only the beginning. With Simon out of the picture, my focus shifted to Sorensen. Marcus had uncovered the location of a warehouse where Sorensen stored his records, physical proof of his schemes. It was risky, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to gather more leverage. Under the cover of darkness, Marcus and I infiltrated the warehouse. The air was thick with dust, the faint hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. We moved quickly, sifting through boxes of documents and computer files. Then, amidst the chaos, I found it. A ledger detailing Sorensen's offshore accounts, his connections to other corrupt executives, and his plans to dismantle Apex. It was everything I needed to destroy him. As we exited the warehouse, my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. "Lucas," she said, her voice shaking. "He called me." My blood ran cold. "What did he say?" "He knows you're coming for him," she said, "and he's not backing down." She looked at Perry and started her Mason voice as she came down the stairs. Then, I clenched my jaw, the weight of the moment settling over me. Sorensen was a cornered animal, and that made him more dangerous than ever. But I wasn't afraid. I had the evidence, the resources, and the resolve to see this through. "Let him try," I said, my voice steel. "He's already lost." As I hung up, the city lights stretched before me, a sprawling testament to ambition and power. Sorensen had underestimated me, just as Simon had. But now the net was closing, and there was no escape. The reckoning wasn't just coming. It was here. The end game began with the precision of a chess master executing a calculated checkmate. Armed with the ledger and evidence gathered from Simon's betrayal, I set my plan into motion. Sorensen's arrogance had been his downfall. He had underestimated my resolve and my ability to outmaneuver him. But this wasn't just about winning, it was about obliterating any chance he had to strike again. The first move was public exposure. I contacted an investigative journalist, a sharp-witted woman named Evelyn Hart, who had built her career uncovering corruption in high places. She wasn't easily impressed, but when I showed her the documents Marcus and I had unearthed, her eyes lit up with the gleam of a predator closing in on prey. "This is career-ending," she said, flipping through the ledger. "Not just for Sorensen, but for anyone connected to him." "Precisely," I replied. "I want this to hit like a tidal wave. No warnings, no leaks, just one definitive strike." Evelyn nodded, already crafting a narrative in her mind. "I'll need a few days to corroborate everything. Once it's ready, we'll blow this wide open." As she left, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The storm I had been navigating for weeks was finally clearing. But there was one final thread to tie off. Olivia. She sat across from me in the living room, her expression a mixture of guilt and determination. In the days since Simon's removal and our discovery of the ledger, she had thrown herself into helping me, eager to prove her loyalty. Yet the shadow of her initial betrayal still loomed between us. "I need to know why," I said, breaking the silence. My voice was steady, but the weight of the question hung heavily in the air. Olivia looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "It wasn't just about the evidence, Lucas," she admitted. "It was about us." I frowned. "Us? You've always been so focused, so driven," she said, her voice trembling. "I admired that about you. But somewhere along the way, I felt invisible. Sorensen saw that. He exploited it. He made me feel important, like I could protect you in a way I hadn't been able to before. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I'd prided myself on my ability to read people, to anticipate their needs and motivations. Yet with Olivia, I had failed. I had been so consumed by Apex, by rebuilding what Sorensen had nearly destroyed, that I hadn't noticed her slipping away. I don't excuse what I did, she continued, her voice breaking, but I need you to know it wasn't about choosing him over you. It was about feeling like I had a role in your life again. Her confession was raw, unfiltered. For a moment I said nothing, the weight of her words settling over me. Then I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. I'm not innocent in this either, I admitted. I let work consume me, let it define who I was. But that doesn't excuse your choices. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded. I'll do whatever it takes to earn it back. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city skyline. We'll see, I said finally, my tone resolute. For now, let's focus on ending this. The morning of Evelyn's exposé felt like the calm before a storm. As the first articles went live, accompanied by damning evidence, the media frenzy erupted. News outlets picked up the story within hours, and Sorensen's name was splashed across every headline. The details were devastating: his embezzlement, his offshore accounts, his collusion with executives like Simon. Evelyn's meticulous reporting left no room for doubt, painting Sorensen as a man who thrived on deceit and greed. The fallout was immediate. Calls flooded Apex's office, investors, journalists, even law enforcement, all seeking answers. But for once, I was ready. I held a press conference, standing tall before a room packed with reporters, cameras flashing incessantly. Sorensen betrayed this company and its values, I said, my voice steady and commanding. But Apex is stronger than one man's greed. We've faced challenges before, and we've emerged stronger every time. This will be no different. The applause that followed felt hollow but necessary. It wasn't about winning hearts. It was about projecting strength. As the conference ended, I fielded a few pointed questions, sidestepping the more personal aspects of the story. The narrative was mine to control, and I wasn't about to let anyone wrest it from me. Behind the scenes, Marcus worked to ensure Sorensen's downfall was complete. He leaked additional documents to law enforcement, ensuring criminal charges would follow the public outcry. By the end of the week, Sorensen was arrested in his Albany safehouse, his face plastered across every news outlet. It was a fitting end for a man who had spent years hiding in the shadows. Simon's fate was less public but equally devastating. With the evidence against him airtight, he faced civil and criminal proceedings that would leave him financially and professionally ruined. The startup he had tried to launch with Sorensen crumbled before it could take off, its investors scattering like rats from a sinking ship. In the weeks that followed, Apex stabilized. The board, initially shaken by the scandal, rallied behind me. Investors returned, buoyed by the swift and decisive action I had taken. But even as the dust settled, I couldn't shake the lingering unease. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing the latest financial reports, Olivia entered quietly. She placed a cup of coffee on my desk, her presence tentative. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You saved the company," she said softly. To me, she said gravely, "I did take risks, but only for you. That's why I'm here now." I looked up at her, searching her face for the woman I had married, the one I had trusted, implicitly. "Yes," I said, "but at what cost?" She flinched, but didn't look away. "I'm still here, Lucas, and I'm willing to fight for us. If you are." His sincerity in her voice was undeniable, but so was the doubt in my heart. Trust, I had learned, was not easily restored. Yet, as I looked into her tearful eyes, I wondered if redemption was possible. Not just for her, but for both of us. Sorensen was finished, Simon was disgraced, and Apex was secure. On the surface, it was a victory. But as I stared out at the city skyline that night, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. Betrayal doesn't end with exposure. It festers, leaving scars that may never fully heal. And though the storm had passed, I knew the battle for my life and my trust was far from over.